Welcome to another episode on leadership and culture in healthcare. I'm Matthew Winn, podcast host. We are in Series 8. We're in an exciting series, something and topics I haven't covered on this podcast before. We are talking about people that have led fabulous campaigns in healthcare and have made a truly big difference. And I am face to face with the legendary Chris Pointon. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself? And I can't believe anybody listening doesn't know who you are and what you have done, but tell people a little bit about you and then tell you the campaign that you were involved with dear Kate.
So thank you for that kind introduction. Hello, my name is Chris Pointon. I am currently the partnership manager between one of the largest supermarkets in the UK and one of the biggest food manufacturers within the UK. That is my full-time job, that is my career, and I love what I do with those two respective organisations. You may also, or you probably know me from the Hello, My Name Is campaign that is widespread across healthcare, not just within the NHS, but across various organisations and across the world. And it's a campaign that my late wife, Dr. Kate Granger, and I founded way back now in 2013, 13 years ago, and it's still going strong in a huge amount of organisations and countries and continues to grow with its main ethos of introducing yourself.
So let's go back then, because it's 10 years this year that Kate died.
Yeah.
And you two started the campaign when? A few years before that?
So we started the campaign in 2013, and it started on the back of a conversation that Kate and I had in her hospital side room when she was being treated for a terminal illness. She had a desmoplastic small round cell tumour, which is a rare and aggressive form of sarcoma. And it was a conversation that we were having around the simple lack of introductions taking place that one particular day in that hospital. And Kate was prolific on social media at the time, and we decided to do something about it. So we said, let's start a campaign. Why don't we call it Hello, My Name Is? And it was born. It was born way back 13 years ago between one conversation between a terminally ill lady who was also a doctor and her non-medic husband.
And just give people a bit of an insight into that. So Kate really unwell. At that point, not really sure whether she was going to survive or whether she would pull through, I presume.
Yeah, so when Kate was first diagnosed in 2011, she was actually given 12 months to live pretty much because of the aggressiveness and scale of cancer that she had. But she actually survived 5 years and she didn't die until 2016. So 2013, we were very much enjoying life as much as we could, albeit Kate was in and out of hospital having treatment. But we were, 2 years after being diagnosed and a year after we thought that Kate would no longer be with us. So, and she wanted to make a difference. She wanted to be that person that was remembered as somebody who did make a difference. And obviously she did make a difference. And the campaign is her ongoing legacy, which will be with us for many generations to come.
And when you were in that space, because you would have been with her as well, Chris, was what she was experiencing about those lack of introductions, that as you wonderfully put, that kind of human connection, which is so important, did it shock you, or did you think, because you live in a different professional world, did you think, well, it's kind of a bit normal, or what was it like from your perspective?
I think from my point of view, given the pathway in my career and working in a business organisation, I think we just took that for granted. We used to hold meetings, face-to-face meetings with customers, with suppliers, and you would always have that introduction as part of that meeting structure. And when you first meet a new customer or a new supplier for the first time, you would have that as just part of, what we did.
Yeah.
But obviously going into a medical setting and, like I said before, Kate was actually a doctor herself. She always took pride in the fact that she was as personable as she could be with her patients. She was a consultant looking after older people, at the end of her career. But we could tell that it doesn't happen in every situation. Now, one thing that Kate always said is she knew that a lot of people who work within the NHS and within healthcare will have always introduced themselves and will have always had that, personable characteristic. But in this situation and on this one particular day, it wasn't taking place. And Kate then tweeted about it, and she was getting a lot of examples coming back to her from people all over the world saying, it's the same in my hospital, it's the same in my healthcare organisation. And she knew that it was something to run with and to sort of start this campaign.
And what then, you launched what was an unbelievable campaign. I mean, you was social media orientated to begin with, wasn't it? And you did all your face-to-face work and all the products and ethos that have come, which we'll talk a bit about the impact. But I'm intrigued, when you two were sitting there and planning and you're uncertain what's going on with Kate, you've got a full-time job, busy professional life, responsibilities. What made you think actually we'll turn this into something different? Because you could have just got on with life, couldn't you? You didn't need to start "Hello, my name is," did you?
No.
I bet you had enough on your plate.
We did, and we often said, like, from one week to the next with Kate and I, it was a case of Kate was in hospital having treatment, and then she would be going off doing talks about her experiences even before the campaign started. Then we'd be trying to tick off items on her bucket list, and then we'd be seeing our family and friends. So we had a busy life.
And she had a big bucket list, didn't she?
She had a very expensive bucket list. But with, Kate sent out a tweet about the campaign. We got Kate's brother to design a website for us at that time. And like I mentioned before, because of all the responses Kate was getting, she knew that it was something that she wanted to run with and wanted to really drive across social media, and not just in social media, but in the real world, and make a difference. And we got one of our designer friends to design the logo for us around introducing yourself with a smile, and you'll know the campaign logo well from working within healthcare. And it's something that Kate took pride in. She was a very, very driven individual, and she always did everything that she did to the best of her ability. And sometimes she often said she was only running on 50% gas because of the chemotherapy or because of the side effects or because of the cancer. But 50% of what she was running at was probably double what I was running at, or double what a lot of people will have been running at. So she took pride in making sure that everything she did was, to the best that she could do. And that's proven in the campaign.
And so let's talk about the campaign a bit. So you wanted an ethos change. Your point is you wanted it to be more customer friendly and personable. And am I right in thinking you started it as a campaign and then saw where it ran? Or was it more defined in your minds about what you thought might be achievable or not?
I mean, thinking back to when we first started the campaign, the first couple of weeks, we probably thought, and Kate probably thought the same, that it'd be something that, would get a little bit of traction and we got a lot of responses, but then it would fizzle out because surely shortly, introducing yourself was not something that was required as a reminder, and not something that was required as a initiative and a campaign, but it just grew arms and legs, and before we knew it, there was very senior members of the hospital where Kate was having her treatment, but also very senior members across the NHS getting involved with the campaign and asking Kate, what can I do to really help push the campaign further? And that was great, because you need everyone at all levels within an organisation to really get behind the campaign to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And Kate always said, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a chief exec, you could be the porter, you could be a nurse, you could be the cleaner. Everyone has an important part to play within any organisation. But you do need that direction, and you do need that. You do need those people talking about the campaign, and that's why I think it continued to grow as much as it did at that point. On the flip side to that, Kate always said to me, what can you do further to help on the campaign trail? And me not being in healthcare, I said, well, over the years of Kate's bucket list and over the years of working in the sector that I work in, we amassed quite a lot of contacts, and I took it upon myself to try and get in touch with people of influence, either in the business world or in, celebrity world, to have a picture taken with the campaign logo and put that on their social media, because it is a human connection. It doesn't matter if you're the Prime Minister or if you're just Joe Bloggs walking on the street. We're all human beings, and that human interaction is the first interaction you may have with an individual. So that's why I got people to use it on social media and spread the word, and it took off in a big way.
And it strikes me that the reason, and I'm thinking back to, I was leading my organisation, as I still am now, in the NHS, and I think it struck a chord about refocusing people on the basics, and it's almost that jolt about, if you can't even get the first interaction right, are we really getting all the other interactions right? And then am I really delivering great healthcare? It's kind of almost just getting everybody back down to the centrality of healthcare is a person-to-person dynamic. I know there's lots of kit and technology involved, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's about people's helping people's to get better, to improve, and to recover. And it kind of seemed to hit that kind of I don't know what I'm trying to say here, because it hit that kind of segment and the right thought to say this is the right thing.
Yeah, and I think completely right with that. And I think the simplicity of it is what made it work. It's not something that you need to necessarily have big investments on. You don't necessarily need to have huge launches on, or a huge transcript of what you need to do and what you don't need to do. It's just introduce yourself to individuals. And like I mentioned before, Kate was already in the public eye because of her. She wrote a book about her experiences as being a patient and a doctor. But she also came up with her own values as a clinician, which also formed part of the campaign. So her sort of key values were all around making sure you've got good communication between individuals, be that doctor and patient, be that, doctor to doctor, make sure it's effective and timely communications. The second part of her values was around seeing her as an individual, not just a bed number, not just somebody with a rare illness, actually seeing the person in front of you as somebody who is a wife, who is an auntie, who does like to play the flute, who does like to bake, all those things, see that person for who they are. And I think that's why the campaign, once again, alongside her values, continues to sort of strike a chord with everyone. And then the other one, which is quite pertinent in healthcare, obviously, is around putting the patient at the heart of every decision that's made. And Kate was a huge ambassador for that, and openly spoke about it at various events, throughout her time before she died. And then also making sure the fourth thing was around the little things making a difference. So those tiny little things. It could be introducing yourself, but it could be making somebody a cup of tea or holding the door open for somebody in the corridor of the hospital, or a whole combination of things, but they make a difference.
Yeah.
And once again, it doesn't matter who you are. It's something that we can all do. It's common courtesy, and those four things alongside the campaign are key to why it's had the longevity it's had, and that it will have.
And so let's talk about how you geared up the campaign, because part of these episodes is to understand how you campaign and what influence you make, and we'll get on to what you've learned about the NHS and places in a second. But so you social media, you've talked about access already, so tell us a little bit about who you, therefore that opened the door for you to be having these conversations with. And then, the first time we met was when you were on one of, I think, your first tour with Kate. I can't remember whether she did two tours or whether but you certainly,
Yeah.
Chris turned up in the most swanky car I've ever seen, gifted by, loaned by, can't remember whether Jaguar or something like that. Very good, let you go around in style. But you went on tour and you gave the message out, and our mine organisation benefited massively from you and Kate talking directly to our people. So tell people how that unravelled and all the different parts of that campaign.
So I think when it all first started is the hospital where Kate was being treated and where she worked as well really got behind the campaign by having name badges done for all colleagues within that particular trust.
That was Leeds.
That was Leeds Hospital Trust, yeah. With the campaign logo emblazoned on that. And then other NHS trusts across the country got wind of what was happening through social media and through people talking about it openly on social media. And at this point, Kate had around 20,000 followers on Twitter, so she was very influential across healthcare. She ended up having 45,000 followers when she passed away, but she was very involved with key decisions at a very senior level within a lot of healthcare organisations. So when one trust does something that really works, other trusts wanted to follow suit. The second part of that, I suppose, is Kate's list of invites for going and speaking at various events across the country and across the world. She taught at events all over the world before she died. It meant that she was spreading the word of the campaign. But we have to remember that Kate was dying of a terminal illness. She was also working 3 days a week, and she was being treated for cancer. So the time that she had outside of all of that, she had to really balance, because she wanted to obviously see family and friends and spend time with, myself and the wider family. So that's when we came up with the idea of taking the campaign on a week-long tour, which incorporated the trust that your chief exec at. And Kate also had, like we've talked about before, a big bucket list, and part of that was, to see the Cause in concert, which is, a pop group from way back. She wanted to go and see Kylie Minogue in concert. She wanted to eat at some of the nicest restaurants in the country. But I went out of my way to make sure that she, got to meet the Cause backstage, or got to meet Kylie Minogue backstage. And that's when we had the idea of getting those guys to have a picture taken with the campaign logo, and then putting that across social media, across their channels, and then it spreads through that particular those pictures. And then I suppose it comes onto the tour. So we had a week-long tour across the UK, and Jaguar Land Rover very kindly offered to lend us, a nice car for that week to transport Kate around in, which I gladly did. I was more the chauffeur, the bag carrier, the logistician behind that week-long tour, but Kate was certainly the figurehead of the campaign, and she was the celebrity of the campaign, going around all these different organisations. And for people to hear it firsthand from somebody that is dying, who's started this campaign and who wants to make a mark on society by leaving this legacy, made it real. It's not something that's a top-down approach from, chief execs or from people within NHS England or, the broader NHS. This is something that was from within the NHS, from a doctor, from a consultant that was working within the NHS, who was just using her own personal experience to make it better for others.
And she must have personally spoken, therefore, to just even on that tour, thousands of people just in that period, let alone all the other conferences that she did. I remember her speaking at a national conference. I think it was one in Birmingham or Manchester or somewhere, and there would have been 1,500 people there, and it was. I mean, you could hear a pin drop when Kate was telling her story, and it's the impact of doing that, isn't it, that makes a difference.
It certainly is, and Kate would very openly admit that prior to her illness and prior to the campaign starting, she was never really one for speaking in front of huge amounts of people or going on, the national or local TV channels or doing radio interviews. But she certainly rose to the challenge. And, for those people that didn't know her that well, you would never have thought that she didn't like doing it because she held a room, she held an audience. And like you mentioned there, you could hear a pin drop when she spoke. And that was because she had a story to share, and she had a personal story that she was willing to share to then make a difference to other people, which is the whole mission for the campaign, is to make a difference. And she always said if it made a difference to one other interaction anywhere in healthcare, anywhere in the world, then she was happy because she knew she'd made a difference for that interaction.
But of course, in reality, made a difference to millions of interactions, not just one. And it's a lovely campaigning ethos, isn't it? That actually we just want to change one thing, but by changing one thing, you end up changing millions of things.
Yeah, and she knew that, and she was a very humble and honest person, and always probably never wanted the limelight to an extent, and just wanted to make that difference. But we now have awards that are named after Kate because of her compassionate care. So the Compassionate Care Awards that that we have locally, we've got more national awards, and then we've got awards in different countries as well, but all linked to Kate's name and to her care for others and that compassionate care that came through.
And Chris, you, in typical normal fashion for you, you've talked about Kate, but you were a double act. I mean, you needed both of your skills, energy. You've talked about your networks to get January Lobo, get Kylie Minogue in front. I bet that was your sheer bloodiness to bindiness to get all those things done. So you were quite you still are, but together you are a remarkable kind of double set of energy to actually get this campaign sorted.
Yeah, and we were a great team, and we both had our positive attributes, and we both sort of drove each other onwards. And my thought process through all of this was, well, Kate's terminally ill. She's doing all this speaking at events. She's really driving her book sales forward. She's continuing to work, etc., etc. What have I got to moan about? I should be there, doing as much as I can to make sure that, one, her life is as good as it can be for the time that she's got, which is what I was doing with, her bucket list. But secondly, to support her memory and legacy by continuing on with the work and continuing, the campaign through others as well, after Kate's death.
And let's go on to that in a second. But was there any time when you thought we needed to stop this because looking after you two and the broader family and Kate was more important than the campaign?
There was times when we had those conversations, I must admit, because like I mentioned, I just wanted what was best for her, but I could see that sometimes she'd agree to go and speak at an event, or she'd agree to do a piece of work for, a TV channel or a radio interview, but it was really, she wasn't in the best of places health-wise, but she didn't want to let people down, so she would almost drug herself up and make sure that she committed to everything that she committed to, because that's the kind of person that she was. And on those times, the organisation I worked for at that point were amazingly good with me to let me have the time off that I needed. At the drop of a hat, I could have taken time off to make sure that I'm supporting and helping where I can. But yeah, we did have those conversations about, can we just let the campaign go of its own accord now and we can just take a step back? But even up until, a few days before Kate died, she was still on social media. She was still doing what she wanted to do to help other people. And, talking about death and dying, it was something that Kate was very open and honest about. She openly spoke about the last few months, weeks, and days of her life, and with the view to hopefully helping somebody else going through something similar. And I think from my side as well, it hopefully helped somebody else going through it from the other side of it, because I was quite open with Kate about, what's life like after Kate. So
let's just talk about what you did next after Kate died. But before you do that, did you and Kate ever get a chance to take stock and think what the impact of the campaign? I bet you did it as you went along, but did you ever kind of almost sit there and go, look what we've done?
I think we did at various points throughout that time. And I think there's some key milestones in there. So when we raised, before Kate died, we got to £250,000 for the two charities that we support. And the way in which we did that is through the sales of Kate's books, through speaker fees that were offered and donated to the charities. But a large majority of that money that was raised and continues to be raised is through the sales of campaign logo, name badges, lanyards, card holders, and other, I don't know, merchandise, merchandise that the logo is on, and the suppliers that are on the website who, sell those products, they have to donate a certain amount to the two charities. And I think that point there of reaching £250,000 for those two charities before Kate died it just showed the impact that we'd had and the impact that Kate had. And then even prior to that, we kept a track of how many books Kate had sold, because obviously they helped with the charity as well, but also helped with the campaign. And she knew that she could rest easy knowing that she'd made a difference because of those, like I said, those milestones and those, not targets, because we never set a target really.
What, as a salesman, you never set any targets? I can't quite believe that. You must have had a thought in your mind about what it was.
I suppose there was 6 months before Kate died, we said it'd be great to get to £250,000 because we were at like £190,000.
So you wanted to get there.
But then, outside of that, it was just seeing it spread across the world was just, and you watch the TV even back then, and you could see the campaign on people's name badges and people introducing themselves, and it was great to see.
And then let's move. Kate sadly died, so 10 years this year. You, and I don't know how you did this, because you're such an important part of your life. You decided to carry on with the campaign, and you've done your own tour as well. You've come and talked to our organisation, and we've got you filmed. You pop up every induction for new members of staff. Here's Chris Pointon, our voice from the north. Here he come. So just think what was going through your mind then about sustaining the campaign, and what was going through your head at that point to kind of then say, this is what we're going to do.
So I suppose just taking a slight step back. So prior to Kate's death, because we knew she was going to die, we could have those conversations about what's next for Chris, kind of thing. And one of the things that we both wanted to do before Kate was diagnosed was to travel and to see the world and to, experience different cultures, which we did get to see many of those before she died, but, not to the extent that we wanted to. So we then said, well, when, you're no longer here, Kate, I can carry the campaign on by experiencing different cultures, doing, traveling the world, but at the same point, carry the campaign on. So after Kate died, a few weeks later, I returned to work, but I decided at that point that because I was getting a lot of invites to go and speak at different events, and I was getting a lot of communication with different organisations, I wanted to take a career break for a year, an unpaid career break, which the organisation I worked for at that point were happy, they signed that off. So I decided to do 12 months, and in that 12 months, I did over 200 talks across the world. We did 3 tours down in Australia and New Zealand. We did talks across Europe, and we did a huge amount of talks across the UK and mainly within the NHS across the UK, because I felt that, one, it helped me come to terms with what had happened. Obviously, losing Kate at the age that she was 34 when she passed away. I was 39 at that point. It meant I could carry on Kate's legacy and the campaign in other countries around the world. And it also gave me a chance to sort of stop, reflect, and experience those different cultures as well in that 12 months. And I suppose in some ways it did really help having that 12 months off, even though it wasn't really 12 months off, because I was still unofficially working for the campaign, but I enjoyed the time. And looking back now, the majority of what we did in that 12 months was really, really great to spread the word and spread the campaign across the world. But then obviously, still got bills to pay, a mortgage to pay. So I decided then to come back to the company that I was working for, but still carrying the campaign in the background as well, which I, did at that point and continue to do to this day. So,
and tell people the campaign is still there. It's still live. It is a campaign. It's a campaign, hopefully, that won't ever disappear. Which is slightly sad on one level, that we still need to campaign on the fundamentals of care. But as humans, always forget, don't we? We always need to be reminded about how to do things. So you've kind of moved into a kind of different phase where it's not so active around you, is it? It's there as an initiative. People can still buy the merchandise. Tell us about other things, because there's the play, there's a whole kind of other things where people can still understand about the fundamentals of what you and Kate started.
Yeah, so as you mentioned there, there is a lot of campaign ambassadors around the world. Obviously yourself being one of those, because you're a huge ambassador for the campaign, and always be grateful for that. And I'm sure Kate will be smiling down on us having this conversation right now, to be fair. But we do have the play. So the play was written by a great playwright locally, and it raises money for the hospice where Kate passed away. That was done many years ago now, but that's been touring for a huge amount of time. And we do have performances of that play coming up in July as part of the International Hello, My Name is Day, which is the 23rd of July this year, which is 10 years on since Kate died. The play also performs at different events throughout the year. So this year so far, we've had 2 or 3 performances. Between now and July, we've got another 2 or 3 performances in the diary. I try and go to some where I can, but I can't get to all of the events. But it's a 20-minute or 25-minute performance with an actor and an actress on stage, and telling the story or sharing the story of, of Kate and I in a way that's different to how I deliver a keynote presentation about the campaign. I mean, it does have a lot of humour in there, but it's also got obviously emotion and sadness. But it's a great, well-written play that I encourage anyone to go and see if you get a chance, because it does make people stop and think about their own lives as well. And also, like I said, we've got those ambassadors that will actively and always have the campaign in mind. And like you said, albeit the campaign logo will always be around, and the main ethos is around that simple introduction. And if it can be used to remind somebody, oh yeah, I'll introduce myself, then it still does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and you need those reminders. I mean, we in my organisation, we have the "Hello, my name is" in the NHS lozenge on that lanyard that you guys have organised, and we've got the frame for people's ID cards, and we continue to get those for every new members of staff, because your point is bang on. You need to be just reminded. You need that jolt. It was, I do remember. Everybody needs reminding of that human connection all the time. However good they are, not bad people, they forget. But life is busy and stuff gets in the way and things are messy, and sometimes our patients aren't very nice to us, and we it's just those cues are really important, aren't they?
Yes.
And they raise money for the hospice and others, don't they?
They do indeed, yeah.
Yeah, which is fabulous. So, Chris, when you 200 talks by yourself, all the stuff you do with Kate, all that experience, knowledge, you've seen a lot. Help people understand what you've seen about leadership amongst all of that. So I guess you go where you like with it, but it's your personal leadership. You would have learned a lot from it. But what have you seen? I'm intrigued in this podcast focused on leadership and culture. And what have you seen that people have done really well that changes the culture, and they've led that culture on the back of the campaign? Because you would have seen great stuff. You've probably seen some rubbish stuff, and you've seen some indifferent stuff. So what are your observations around that?
So first and foremost, from a healthcare setting point of view, before I come on to just a little bit about leadership from my own perspective, is those organisations that really embraced the campaign from the start reap the benefits in their patient surveys and in, I say staff morale to an extent, because this is all around that human interaction. And if you've got a workforce, colleagues who are more engaged with that human connection with their patients, then hopefully that will have the result in the staff surveys. And I've had a couple of organisations in the last 10 years when we've spoken to them say that has a positive benefit, and some of the staff surveys now actually do have introductions or hello, my name is as part of some of those questions that they ask their patients. But I think, yes, it's good to have that as part of inductions as well. So organisations that have used it and leaders that have used it as part of inductions. But it's also the great of those that, yes, get behind the campaign and yes, talk about the campaign, but they also know the backstory to it, and they are quite happy to share that with their colleagues to say this was something that isn't a top-down initiative. This came from within the NHS and came from within, a terminally ill doctor. It isn't something that me as your leader have said that you've got to do. It's something that, working in healthcare, you should want to do it anyway. But it's those individuals that driving the campaign are the ones that know the background and know the history to it, because not everybody does. I talk at a lot of organisations, even in the last sort of 2, 3, 4 years, and when you speak to the staff afterwards who are in the audience, they'll say, oh, I didn't know the story to it. I just thought it was something that we were told we have to do. And it's like, no, this is where the campaign came from. You can find more information about it on the website, the history of the campaign. And other news about the campaign on the website, but until you actually hear it firsthand from those individuals, it really sort of hits home to say we need this to continue, because if not, it'll not lose its momentum or lose its focus, but it might lose where it came from, because it came from one individual who was terminally ill. And that's, I suppose, the big thing. And that's what makes the great leaders, those people that really understand the campaign and the ethos behind it, to then share that with their colleagues, and then they can share it with their colleagues. But then from a leadership point of view, for myself, I mean, I've worked in my career, I've worked in 3 organisations pretty much, and I've worked with some great leaders, and it's about learning from the leaders that you've had that you really respect, and learn from them, use that in your own career pathway, but also learn from your mistakes and learn from their mistakes, because they'll openly admit they will have made mistakes. And I think that's another sign of a great leader, is openly admit to being wrong and openly admit to making mistakes, as long as we learn from them. And like I said, for me, it is knowing people for who they are as individuals, and not just treating everyone as a colleague or a number or a whatever they may be in their organisation. But I have been blessed with, like I said, people that I have worked for, and I've worked with some great leaders that I truly respect and will always have learned from them, and will do ongoing.
Mm. And Chris, as we draw this to a close, we'll talk for ages about the campaign, but what can people look out for then in this kind of 10-year anniversary of Kate's death? So I think there's some events. I'm sure we'd love people to reinvigorate their support for it, and do all the right things. Tell people, and we'll put this in the notes so people can see it. But give people a little bit of how they can get involved, what they could do.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of involvement, the key date, I suppose, is the 23rd of July. That's a date that I designated as International Hello, My Name is Day, straight after Kate had died, because one of the days she died, 2, it was also our wedding anniversary. So it made sense to have that as the annual International Hello, My Name is Day. In terms of getting involved with that day, have relaunch events within your own organisations. You can contact myself via our website, using the contact form, and they all come through to myself if you want any, help with organising an event. Do selfie campaigns within your trust. Go and speak to the people that you need to speak to around why don't we use Hello, My Name Is logo on our badges in our trust. We've also got other events. So we are performing the play 3 times that day within Leeds. We've got the play performing, 2 or 3 weeks before that as well. I'll probably be putting something out there on social media on the day for people to sort of reflect and really think about how you can make a difference in the work that you do in healthcare, because everyone that works in healthcare makes a difference. You might not think you do, but you certainly do to the people that you're looking after. And it's just taking those tiny little things that you do on an everyday basis and really thinking, what can I do to create that legacy that this person created?
Yeah. And 10 years is a remarkable time. You've clearly, Chris, learned a phenomenal amount during that time. You got new family now, you remarried, beautiful daughter, new, seriously impressive job. I don't know how you do what you do in life, in terms of what you do, but this is clearly just something that is just a important part of your life and your experience that you still want to share with people.
Yeah, and like you said, it's always going to be part of my life, because we founded it 13 years ago, and it's something that is relevant as much as it's as relevant now as what it was back then, and it will be in another 13 years time, because it's that simple introduction that makes a difference. Having said that, the involvement that I now have on the campaign versus what I did, maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago is a lot less, because one, I've got new priorities in life, which obviously are number one priority is the family side of it. But secondly, it doesn't need as much involvement from myself, because we do have all those people have either heard me speak about the campaign, or have heard Kate speak about the campaign before she died, or seen the play, or have read about the campaign in articles, or have spoken to somebody who knows about the campaign. Everyone's an ambassador for the campaign. If they can then share that with their family and friends, and word will continue to spread, because it is such a simple and effective campaign that's been led by an inspirational individual from the start, which is what Kate was and continues to be with the campaign.
Yeah. Chris, thank you for sharing your story about the campaign, reminding us about all the fundamentals of why it was important to do it at the beginning, why it's still important to do those things and maintain that approach. And in the 10th year of Kate's death, all those timely reminders that actually on the 23rd of July especially, we should be celebrating, we should be reinvigorating our approach. And I think your point of it's not so much you, it is everybody stepping up and saying this is the right thing to do. Chris, you are an inspiration, and remain an inspiration, will continue to be. And I think I just want to say thank you, because you, from such simplicity with Kate, quite an amazing thing was born and continues to grow. And we should all thank you for that, and thank you for the emotion and the time that you've put into it over the years. And it's been a delight to talk through that on leadership and culture in healthcare. Thank you, Chris.
No, my pleasure. Thank you all. Thank you.